So welcome to episode 5 of the Paid Search NYC podcast. Absolutely thrilled to be joined by the one and only Kat Sale. Kat's a co-founder of an agency in the south of England called House of Performance. That agency specializing in paid search and paid social. I was looking on the website just before jumping on, noticed you've won 2 awards in 2023. You've got 2 awards from last year, including UK Paid Media Agency of the Year. And you were saying just before we came on that you've been shortlisted for a few more this year.
Yeah. Hi. Thanks for having me. Yeah, we've got 4 shortlisted at the UK Paid Media Awards. They're really good because they make the team feel really good. They're good for morale. I've done a lot of soul searching about awards. We're going to get straight into it. And I think they're mainly good for like boosting morale within the team. They are good for like general PR, I guess, but you know, I think they just make people feel good and they give recognition, don't they? So yeah, we'll keep investing in them.
Absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. There's 2 sides to the awards. They're a lot of work and it is a bit of a game, but
yeah,
in the spirit of celebrating great work, and everyone wants to do work they're proud of, to be celebrated at an industry level is very cool. So yeah, that's amazing. Congrats. And
thanks.
If we'll be voting in, where is it, February?
It's in it's in the 12th of March.
12th of March. Okay, keep an eye out.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, and on top of that, also bossing the LinkedIn game. I think anyone who follows you on LinkedIn, a lot of fun doing that. Great content, and that's something you've been doing for a year or 2 now.
Well, I've always been into LinkedIn since I started my career, but we made a bit of a pledge pretty much when we started the business. We noticed the impact it had, and then in 2023 I pledged in the January to post every day without fail, and that really made it easy to do because it becomes a habit, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I just really love LinkedIn for like the industry knowledge sharing and the learning, because that's where we get all our updates. You know, we don't hear it from Google, for example. We hear it on there.
Yeah.
And I think it helps. Well, I hope it helps raise the standards in our industry. That's my game anyway, basically.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And the speed at which some of the guys on there find those updates.
Yeah.
How do you find these so quickly?
Yeah, they don't sleep. They literally don't sleep.
Yeah, super useful resource.
Yeah.
Which is really cool. And actually, I think I saw last year you were shortlisted in the top 100 PPC experts, which is also cool. Yeah, congrats on that.
Yeah, thanks. Didn't expect that one.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, before we get into it, one question I did have for you. You've obviously had a lot of success as a co-founder of running your own agency. And I think last time we spoke, you were up to nearly 14, 15 people. When people ask you, can you sort of credit 2-3 things that have led to that success, or is it more just 1,000 small wins? How do you kind of answer that?
Oh, that's hard. Yeah, we have relentless drive, Emma and I. My partner is called Emma, sorry, so I'll refer to Emma a lot. So between us, we've got relentless drive. Emma in particular, if we get a knockback, we go to a pitch and we don't win, for example, she's immediately looking for the next opportunities and literally creating them herself on LinkedIn. So like when we get a knockback, we are pushed to do better rather than we don't sulk, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So
that's, I guess, one. The other one is like very early on, we set out our values. We knew what our values were. A, we're aligned on them. And B, we pretty much make every decision based on them, which sounds so easy, but like actually sticking to them is quite hard. So like one of them is we're always authentic, which means we're always honest, and we only will work with people that are also always honest and themselves. So if you start working with a client and it doesn't feel authentic in any way, we end up cutting them off. And that sounds crazy, but I think that has steered us away from some really bad paths and kept us on good ones, which then helps you grow. We're not afraid of like short-term pain for long-term gain, definitely. I mean, we're in that right now. we've just hired in the last 6 weeks, we've hired 4 people. They're all super junior. So we're very much in like training and learning and development phase. It's expensive, but and it is expensive. Like our accountant said to us, could you be a bit more profitable? Sorry. I shouldn't really say that out loud. But we were like, no, because right now we're investing for future. Because in 6 months, those people hopefully will be amazing and, you know, part of the next generation of the team. So yeah, short-term pain, long-term gain. Sorry, that's what I was saying. We're not afraid of that. Whereas I think a lot of people set out to do business need or feel they need returns immediately, and then they don't get to the long term because they haven't thought in the right way. Yeah.
And you saying that it does sound easy, but it's incredibly difficult, because like the two situations you've described there are like opposite ends of each other, like sticking to your values and, you know, saying no to certain clients, but at the same time investing and like taking extra cost. And when you're running an agency, it's so difficult to turn down revenue when you've got, you know, a growing staff bill cost.
Mouths to feed. Yeah, definitely.
It takes so much courage. So that's
it's a challenge, but yeah, it's important. Definitely important.
Awesome. Well, thank you for indulging me on that little sidebar there. The subject we had today, actually, and the reason we got you on was chat about value-based bidding, which is something that, you know, on my side, get a lot of questions from clients about how to set it up. How does value-based bidding look for you? Like, how would you describe value-based bidding to clients?
Well, it does what it says on the tin, really. You're bidding to a specific value. That value can be the real value of what you're selling, or it could be just the profit of what you're selling, or it could be a fictional value of what you're selling. We've got a lot of experience of that, where we essentially, I don't want to say make up, but you fabricate the numbers to what you know is actually strong lifetime value for a client. So yeah, it's putting the money where the value is, I suppose, in a nutshell, isn't it?
Yeah. And I guess the e-com side, that's easier to understand because the value is already there. Yeah. Probably where it gets trickier, and probably where I think advertisers are asking more and more questions, more on the lead gen side. And you touched on like the fictional value, which is where that comes in. How do you approach that?
Well, it depends. You need to have quite a really good understanding and clear data set of what your current customers are. So we work with a client that they have a really advanced prediction model that does predicted lifetime value, essentially. So when a customer comes in, they have about 5 or 6 steps from initial lead to full-blown active customer that's worth money. And the value of that customer can increase over time, but might not. Could be a one-time thing they use it. So essentially, they've got this model that can predict at the first and second instance of them signing up what their value is going to be based on what they've done so far, so that we can bid to the higher predicted lifetime value customers, which sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Definitely got challenges. And this is with a really advanced client that's got an amazing data team. It's got challenges because you've got this model, but then you break that down into Google Ads campaigns or Meta, whatever. We use it in both. And your campaign's got to have enough data for it to work properly, right? So that then affects the structure you can have to make sure your campaigns have got enough data. So we don't tend to use portfolio bidding that often. We tend to use campaign level bidding. So the campaign really needs like minimum of 30 proper conversions in 30 days, doesn't it?
Yep.
A lot more ideally, but definitely minimum. So that's the first challenge, I suppose. The second challenge is with that client, we advertise in like more than 50 countries. So the variation of the people in those countries is massive, and what they could then end up becoming valued at. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So they've only got a certain amount of budget. It's not a small budget by any means, but we have to be sure that, you know, we can't have like a campaign per country, for example, spread way too thin straight away. So we have to segment by like different groups of countries, and then we have to make sure there's enough data for the model to work. So we bid, sorry, to go full circle, we bid to predicted lifetime value where we can, and where we can't, we bid more manually in like a CPA way, but then we will look at that predicted lifetime value data because it's all still there, right? We're just not telling the system to look at it in some cases. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So halfway between human and machine, I guess.
I mean, that's a great example because it kind of demonstrates how far you can take it if you go really complex, but then the limitations of that still with the system.
Still, yeah, definitely.
And you talking about like, you said they advertise across multiple countries, right?
Yeah.
So with many clients, we get questions around like, well, how is this market doing? How is this market doing? How do I go up in this market? How do I increase market share in the market? But if your structure is geared more towards the kind of data consolidation point of view, you kind of lose those levers, you know, to go up or down and say, Spain. And so it becomes a trade-off.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? It's like, I think part of it is just really understanding the client's business and what's important to them.
Yeah. So it's tricky, but in the example of this client, they don't care where the leads come from, really. They care on the value of that lead. So whether it comes from Dubai or Chile, they are advertising in both. They actually don't care. So for them, we have the countries merged for the most part. But if we can, obviously, you can still see the data by country. So if you then see, oh, there's a massive opportunity to get more in Chile, as a random example, you can pull it out.
Yeah.
There's enough data there for the bidding to then work.
So it's almost like a constantly evolving thing based on being in the data in the markets.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is great because that makes the role fun because you're kind of always looking at the data.
Yeah.
And it's not just to turn it on and leave it. And it's probably a great example of, despite all the automation, look at the amount of manual sort of human input and still required.
Yeah.
Which is really cool.
Yeah, because we still check what the predicted is showing against. We actually can't easily see sort of the lifetime value of that customer as a figure, but we can see what they're spending with them in the first 7 days. So we can still check that against that, and it doesn't always align, of course.
Yeah,
it is fun, and I do like that it's always evolving. And it means but actually, because the model we've got more data to play with because we're going off people's initial lead, where there's a lot of them, whereas if we get down to when they become an actual customer, there's a lot less, right? So yeah, it opens up a lot more possibilities, which is cool.
Yeah, and kind of slightly on that point, how do you think about, so with different conversion actions, sometimes the way I like to think about it is, if you have kind of a higher level conversion action, let's say it's just a lead form, and you do a max conversions or target CPA based on that lead form action, you're probably going to go after a much wider audience because the system is like, well, if you just need me to get someone to fill in a form, I can do that.
Yeah.
You're filling in or pushing in like advanced lifetime value data. You need to go after these subset of people. That audience of people gets much smaller.
Yeah.
Which is good because that's what you want to go after.
Yeah.
Kind of lose access to those people outside of that.
You do, and your CPCs go up.
Yeah.
Massively so, but you don't care because they should be worth more. So it's okay. In that example of that client I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Because not necessarily about volume, it's about value.
But how do you get more into the sort of into the higher value bucket, you know?
You keep looking at, and that is why it is good that we've got so many markets we can advertise in, because you look at where the higher value is coming from and try and get more from there.
Yeah.
Which, you know, in theory, the system should just do it for you. If it's a bad example and it is made up, but if you see that in Chile there's lots more high value customers coming through, it really, the algorithm should just be spending more there. Should be. You have to check on that, make sure it is.
What's your experience of that? Do you find like it normally works how you'd like to think it does, or?
I think it's about 70% of the time.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, at the moment, but it's changing so fast. The way it all works, if like doing what I'm talking about, you probably couldn't really do 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
It's changed so quickly. So I think, like, I'm saying, okay, 70% of the time it's pretty good. Next year, probably that'll be like 80% and so on,
Yeah. Just gets
It
incrementally.
is rapidly improving. Definitely.
Yeah. So that sounds like it's the most sophisticated level of VBB that you have.
Yeah.
And then do you have clients like across the spectrum in terms of like just static values on
Yeah.
3 or 4 actions?
Yeah. So we've got such a mix of clients, like across all industries. We've got clients where, like, again, on lead gen specifically, different types of, depending on what they're after, would differ in the value. So yeah, we assign different values based on those conversion actions. But to take it back a bit more simply, if we talk about search specifically, I quite prefer to just have the campaign segmented. So say, like, one of the examples is working with a law firm, and we would just have a campaign per type of thing they're selling, service, I suppose you could say. So, you might have a general employment law one, but then once you start getting into specifics, like, and I can't think of what they are now because I'm not an expert in law, but like something about litigation versus someone looking for a contract help, you can then have different conversion values for that. But does that offer much value over just bidding to standard flat CPA? In that example, I would say no, not really.
Can you double click on that a little bit more? What do you mean by, like, what's the standard CPA comparison?
So in that example, the client just wants us to get him leads, right? For his law firm, and the difference in value between those contracts isn't that great. It's not that great a difference. And once he signs someone, they could become a customer again and again. We are nowhere near tracking that with this client. So we don't know about the lifetime value. We've asked, we can't get there yet. That's fine. So is it worth us going to the effort of value-based bidding, or just using target CPA or max conversions, depending on the campaign? I think no, in this example specifically, because it's so much easier sometimes, isn't it, just to whack a CPA campaign on and not assign those values. I don't think it's worth the effort. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So it's like the conversion actions you have access to in the platform, the relative difference between them is not large enough to the system.
Yeah.
And that's a great point, because that's a consideration setting it up is, do you have actions of relatively different values? If you don't, you're just kind of adding complexity.
Yeah. I think because it sounds sexy and exciting, people want to do it, but is it really worth it? Sometimes it is, sometimes it isn't. Yeah.
And then I guess potentially to make it even more complicated, if you have actions that are so different in value, it's like, well, putting those together is also probably not a great idea either, because if you have a lead form that's worth, say, fictional $10, and then you have another action which is worth $50,000.
Yeah. No.
And the system's not going to know what to do with those.
No, because you probably only get one a month of the 50,000.
Yeah.
Right. It's not, doesn't make any sense. This is where you just have to use your logic each time with the automation, because if you don't, you'll just have mad campaigns set up that don't really make sense. And it sounds really sexy as a strategy, but then it's not actually doing anything. Yeah.
And not only that, it's almost an appreciation that you go into it knowing that there could technically be 2 or 3 different setups that could work. You're going to try this one, and then you can try the next one.
Yes.
There is no one setup that's probably the obvious.
No.
There's a couple that could work.
Yeah, I mean, back to that example I said right in the beginning of the predicted lifetime value model, we've gone back with some campaigns to look at much earlier steps in the customer journey without the predicted, because it fits the campaign. So it's never black and white. Yeah, which is confusing for people, but that's kind of what I love about the industry, because there's always different ways to test and look at it.
Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm terrible at training people, because when they ask me about certain scenarios, I'm like, well, it does depend. And
yeah,
like, that doesn't help me.
That's why the training's so hard. And people, I always say, because all of our team have come in from entry level, and I always say at some point between 2 and 4 months, usually you'll have a moment where stuff starts to click. And that, I think, is when you start to understand that it isn't black and white, and I can understand it enough to find the where, you know, in the grey. But yeah, everyone needs that click moment, definitely.
Yeah.
It's tricky.
I guess one of the things that we haven't talked about yet is just how different campaign types factor into this. Like, is this something that applies across search, PMax, demand gen, YouTube, or does it differ by campaign type?
Interestingly, it does differ, definitely differs, sorry. So for that client with the predicted lifetime value, it didn't work on PMax. So we've got back to testing a more standard CPA model. It definitely differs by campaign type. The campaigns have different purposes, but my answer really is test it with each, because the campaign types are changing all the time, right? Look at demand gen. That is like progressing so much now as a campaign type, potentially going to be like the #1 new campaign this year. PMax have just rolled out a load of new updates, which is great.
Yeah, I saw some things on LinkedIn and the roadmap from the rep, and actually there's some really interesting stuff in there.
Yeah.
It sounds like they're really listening, and
I think so. They're giving out so much stuff that, you know, they were never going to. So interesting. Yeah, it's good.
Yeah, exciting. I think 2025 is going to be, well, it's always an interesting year in paid search, but I think it's going to be interesting from a leaning out of search into non-search in a way that people are probably more comfortable with.
Yeah.
It's been pushed by Google, you know, it works, but I think there's been that kind of trust element, not knowing what's working. And it's a shame, because as products like PMax and demand gen, they're theoretically, they're amazing.
Yeah.
This has been that kind of trust and issues.
Oh, definitely. I mean, when we first tested demand gen last year, it was horrific. The performance was so bad. We were like, what is this? We turned it off, obviously. And now, for some of our clients, it's top campaign.
Really?
Yeah. Really interesting. Yeah. It's just changed loads, and we've got better at knowing how and when to use it, I think, as well.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I know you're very busy, so I really appreciate you coming on. It's been great. I tried to keep track of like some of the things we chatted about. Not always using portfolio bid strategies, using campaign level. Thought that was interesting. A conversation around like how the data available indicates the kind of client structure or the account structure. So like really just understanding the client's business and the context, really important. Testing different scenarios. And then for anyone who's kind of new to the industry, that point on 2 to 4 months, like just hang in there.
Minimum, yeah.
It'll click. I think that's really good, because I was speaking to a couple of people who were looking to break in early this week, and they're asking for advice. And I wish I'd remembered that at the time. Like when you get into it, just bear with, it'll click. But it's going to take time. Yeah,
it's so interesting, because like I remember this feeling. You think that everyone around you is so clever, because there's all these acronyms and buzzwords that you have no idea what they are, and you didn't learn them at uni. And before you know it, you get it all, and you're training someone else. If you throw yourself into it. Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Really enjoyed this, and hopefully we can do something similar soon.
Great. Thanks.
Cool. Thanks, Kat.